The royal family has survived scandals, leaks, betrayals, and global humiliation, but nothing compares to the danger they've created for themselves right now, because the one person they thought they could quietly push aside is the person who knows the most, and after decades of being protected, sheltered, and kept close, she's suddenly been cut loose, with nothing left tying her to the palace except the secrets she's been holding for nearly 40 years. Her fall wasn't slow, it wasn't subtle. It happened the moment she was told to leave the home that shielded her from the world. A move that seemed administrative on the surface, but inside the palace it sent shockwaves, because removing her didn't just uproot her life, it unlocked a threat the monarchy can't predict or control. A threat fueled by isolation, financial pressure, and years of buried resentment. And now, with offers flooding in from across the ocean, the question isn't whether she'll talk, but how much she's willing to reveal. Before we break down how this entire situation spiraled into the palace's worst nightmare, take a moment to subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next. For more than 2 decades, she lived inside one of the most recognizable residences in Windsor, a place that symbolized stability even when her public life was anything but. Royal Lodge wasn't just a home, it was the last reminder of the world she once belonged to, a world that kept her close, even after the divorce, even after the scandals, even after the headlines turned against her. It was the quiet agreement the family maintained. She would stay out of the spotlight, and they would make sure she had somewhere to land. That agreement ended the moment she was handed the notice to leave. There was no negotiation, no soft explanation, just a firm decision that her time there was done. And the place waiting for her wasn't another residence on royal property, wasn't a discreet cottage, wasn't even part of the Windsor grounds. Instead, she was sent to a small converted annex on her daughter's estate in the Cotswolds, a building the media quickly labelled a refurbished cattle shed. The contrast was impossible to ignore, from a sprawling historic home with over 30 rooms to a modest one-bedroom unit separated from the main house by a courtyard. Renovated, yes, but unmistakably humble. The message was clear. She was no longer being accommodated, protected, or kept close. She was being moved out of the frame entirely. What shocked insiders wasn't the relocation itself, it was how abruptly and decisively it happened. The family had tolerated her presence for decades, even as controversies piled up. But now, suddenly, the patience was gone. And that kind of shift doesn't happen without a reason. But the deeper problem wasn't the downgrade in living space, it was what the move exposed, the fragile reality she'd been able to hide for years, and once that foundation cracked, everything else began collapsing with it. And that's where the real trouble started.
For years, she managed to keep her financial struggles tucked safely behind the walls of Royal Lodge. The house acted like a shield, masking the chaos that followed her from one business venture to the next. But once that roof was taken away, the truth became impossible to hide. Her situation wasn't just unstable, it was collapsing. Her income streams had already started drying up long before the eviction. Book deals that once brought in steady money were suddenly pulled, with reports that her most recent children's book never even made it to shelves. Projects she depended on were cancelled quietly, leaving her without the cushion she'd counted on. And the pressure became unmistakable when she was forced to sell a Mayfair property at a massive loss. hundreds of thousands gone overnight. You don't take a hit like that unless you're backed into a corner. The move to the Cotswolds didn't create her financial problems, it exposed them. Without the security of Royal Lodge, the cracks widened. She had no official support, no allowance, and no guarantee of protection. For the first time, she was facing the world without a lifeline, and the combination of money stress and public humiliation pushed her into a far more dangerous mindset. Because when someone who's been cut out of the picture realizes they have nothing left to lose, they start looking for the one thing they still have: leverage. And in her case, that leverage isn't financial, it's informational. And what she knows is exactly what terrifies the palace.
Long before the scandals, long before the headlines turned harsh, she was inside the family's inner circle, not for a few years, but for nearly 4 decades. She wasn't just present at public events, she was behind closed doors, inside private conversations, and close to the people whose relationships shaped the modern monarchy. And that long memory is exactly what makes her so unpredictable now. She lived through the most turbulent years of the Charles-Diana era, witnessing the emotional fallout and the quiet conflicts no camera ever caught. She watched the early days of Charles and Camilla unfold long before the public ever knew what was happening. She saw the tension among the siblings, the fractures that formed inside the family, and the secrets that were never meant to leave the room. These weren't stories told to outsiders, they were whispered moments, personal grievances, and raw confessions shared when trust still existed. And those details matter now more than ever. Because unlike the newer generation of royals who speak about their own experiences, she can speak about what came before, the years the palace has tried hardest to protect. She knows histories, patterns, mistakes and conversations that were buried decades ago. And with her financial situation deteriorating and her safety net gone, the palace can no longer assume she'll keep those memories locked away. The real danger isn't that she might talk, it's that she can talk about things no one else alive is willing or allowed to touch. And across the Atlantic, there are people who know exactly how valuable that is.
The moment news spread that she'd been forced out of Royal Lodge, it didn't take long for the phones to start ringing, not from the palace, but from major American networks. Producers saw the situation for exactly what it was, a rare moment when someone with decades of untouched insider knowledge had been pushed into a corner. And in the world of television, that kind of vulnerability is priceless. Offers began surfacing almost immediately, many of them reaching into the 6-figure range. These weren't invitations for polite conversations or soft promotional interviews. They were pitches for multi-part specials, broadcast exclusives, and prime-time sit-downs designed to pull in millions of viewers. And the people making those offers knew she'd been interviewed in the US before, including by some of the biggest names in the industry. They knew she could deliver a story the world hadn't heard, one with the kind of detail only decades of quiet observation could provide. Inside the palace, this created a level of panic they hadn't expected. A British scandal can be contained, a global one cannot. And an uncensored conversation on an American stage, where questions are sharper, boundaries are looser, and the networks are hungry for royal drama, could ignite a storm the family has no strategy for. Because this time, she wouldn't be speaking as a protected figure or a member of the household who needed to stay in line. She'd be speaking as someone who has been pushed out, left on her own, and backed into a financial corner. And when a story like that reaches the US media, the stakes rise fast. Which brings the king to a problem he never planned for.
From the outside, the move to push her out looked like part of a broader effort to modernize and streamline the institution. Inside the palace, though, it created a problem no one had fully considered. By removing her so abruptly, they didn't just distance her, they weakened every reason she had to stay silent. She watched Andrew receive quiet support, private space, and a comfortable landing, while she was left with none of the same consideration. The contrast wasn't subtle, and it didn't go unnoticed. To her, it felt personal. To insiders, it looked like a miscalculation. And to the palace, it quickly became clear that the consequences could spiral faster than they ever intended. The institution now faces a choice with no clean solution. Either step in and offer her some form of stability, or risk letting her walk straight into the arms of networks ready to amplify every detail she's held onto for nearly 40 years. Paying for silence isn't something the family wants associated with them, but allowing her to speak freely could be far more damaging. What makes this moment so unstable is the simple truth that she no longer has anything to protect. Not her position, not her comfort, not her reputation inside the family. And when someone reaches that point, the old rules stop applying. The palace may still hope she'll stay quiet, but hope isn't a strategy. And with every passing day, the risk only grows, because what comes next is no longer in their control. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, make sure you hit the like button. It really helps more people discover videos like this. And if you want to stay ahead of every twist in this story, remember to subscribe and turn on notifications. There's a lot more unfolding behind the scenes, and you won't want to miss what comes next.